So a question came into Reddit, would having kids be more positive or negative for me? And I haven't really been in the habit of answering any questions as of late, was for quite a while actually. But something about this chart is kind of textbook, is kind of a textbook, no, has negative textbook indicators. And so I basically just give kind of a blanket from the looks of this chart, negative. That's basically all I said. Um, of course, the please elaborate. And actually, the OP actually said, thank you for your honesty. And so they also asked me to elaborate, excuse me. So I thought that I would look at some of the factors that we learned from Bonatti and his testimonies regarding childbirth, and I thought we'd go into all of the different things that we would look at to see what is going on around her fertility in this chart. So, first of all, I want to bring our attention to the fertile signs versus the sterile signs versus the signs of few children. Right. So the sterile signs are Gemini, Virgo, and Leo. Gemini, Leo, and Virgo. So we have a Gemini rising. So if sterile sign is rising. Note also, of course, that the first house and the ruler of the first house specifically represent the body. And of course, the moon has signification in everything, and so including the body. So we will be looking at those two things. So we see that. Then we'd be looking at the fifth house, of course, which is the house of children. And note that the fifth house is not just the raising of children, and how enjoyable that having children would be, which I don't think it would be, obviously, but also how fertile is the person, how able to bring a child to term. And so we've got Virgo on the cusp of the fifth house. Virgo is another sterile sign on the cusp of the fifth house. Then we have a retrograde malefic. We have the minor malefic Mars, retrograde, and peregrine. Rather, he's in his own triplicity, but he's only the participating ruler of the triplicity. So we've got this retrograde malefic, and of course, not just a retrograde malefic, but we've got a retrograde malefic with Rahu, with the tail of the or the head of the dragon. So that's a quite malefic combination, right? We know that in medieval astrology, retrogradation is an impediment. Mars is already considered to be a malefic planet. Rahu, or the head of the dragon, is considered to be negative with what is good with positive planets, good with the benefics, and negative with the malefics, so to speak. But Mars Rahu can be a very strange and very difficult expression of Mars. So, and in Virgo as well, with in that kind of sterile sign. So we know that Mars represents the drawing of blood. It represents all of the things, the cuts and the bruises and that kind. And so often when I see a wayward Mars like this in the fifth house, I would be worried about the possibility of miscarriages. There could be an abortion, things of that nature can happen. Then I'm not saying it absolutely will, but Mars once again draws blood, cuts. Mars is the surgeon, so all of those things. Now, Mars could have been in a sign like Scorpio or Pisces or Taurus, which are the three, Taurus or Cancer, which are the three fertile signs. And of course, that would have said something very different about this fifth house and about this Mars. And of course, it didn't have to be with the head of the dragon with the North Node as well. So now I know that the North Node these days is seen in a different way, but once again, we're looking at this from the 13th century standpoint of Bonatti. Now, one of the things that Bonatti looked at when he looked at children or not, and we are going to look at where the ruler of the fifth house is, he not only looked at where the ruler of the fifth was, he looked at which planets said yes to children and whether they were in important places, efficacious slash powerful houses. And basically, he wanted to see if the planets who said yes to children were in the first, 10th, 11th, or 7th, or 5th, right? And then so whether the planets that said yes or the planets said no were in the first, 10th, 11th, or 7th, or fifth. So we already looked at the fifth, and we have and the planets that say no are the Sun, Saturn, and Mars, and the tail and the head and the tail of the dragon. So we've already got a no in the fifth house, of which is specifically the house of children. Nothing is in the first. Jupiter is one of the planets who say yes. So the planets who say yes to children are Mercury, the moon, and Jupiter. Mercury, Venus, the moon, and Jupiter. So Jupiter is in the 10th house, which is the house that says yes to children. In the 11th, pretty much all around the 11th, I can't really see, what is it, 13, it looks like, is the cusp of the 12th. So pretty much all of the 11th, because all of this stuff is, I would consider, going into the 12th. So all we've got in the 11th house is K2, which is also, once again, a no. And then we've got our planets that do say yes in what I'm going to call the 12th house. And then we've got Mercury, thankfully not leaving the combustion of the sun. I thought it was combusted. So thankfully the Mercury is moving out of the combustion of the sun, but that it's moving deeper into the 12th house, which of course, as the OP mentioned, I had read or had heard that the fifth Lord of the fifth and the 12th can be difficult for the Lord of the fifth, and indeed it can be. Luckily, this Mercury is outside of the rays of the sun, but it is also in the proximity of the sun, and the sun, as the exaltation ruler of Aries, rules the 12th house, is a ruler of the 12th house with Mars. So this very screwed up Mars, or very kind of wayward, difficult Mars, is also the ruler of this 12th house. So we know that the 12th house is the house we call the house of self-undoing, etc. The house of not being able to reach what it is we're looking for, the house of the pipe dream, things of that nature. So with the sun there, also, with the sun there might be some like, it's going to happen no matter what. Like, there might be a little bit more, thankfully it's not in a fixed sign. Yeah, thankfully this isn't in a fixed sign, so this person might not get fixated on having children at any cost. But note also that the moon is in detriment and applying to the square of Saturn with the reception. So moon is in Capricorn, but and applying to the square of Saturn, where Saturn receives the moon from Capricorn, from his domicile of Capricorn, but still that's an inhibitor. Right, so Saturn, it still will. He might make things more serious, might make the perspective more serious, but he can still act as a prohibitor in a general way in this chart, right? Because remember, the moon is the co-significator of all things, but and specifically, it looks like the 8th, 9th, and 10th of the chart is where this person will experience quite a bit of a what contretemps with Saturn, and with Saturnian paralysis. And of course, with the Venus and the Sun. Okay. The Venus here is besieged, and she rules the 6th and the 11th. No, 6th and the. She would be the natural ruler of the 12th. Oh, so she should rule the 5th and the 12th, but she's in this chart ruling the 6th and the 12th because of that. So we've got the besieged Venus as well, and Venus and Jupiter are the two main planets representing fertility. And so Jupiter is luckily not in bad shape, but he's ruled by this Saturn, but who's kind of helped by the Venus, but not helped at all by the Sun, right? So the Saturn is deeply combusted by the Sun. It's moving. It's not quite ready to go into Casimir yet. I do use the 16-minute rule as opposed to the 1 degree rule. So this Saturn is not quite, neither the Venus nor the Saturn are quite in the heart of the Sun yet, which would be very helpful to them. The Venus is detrimented, the Saturn is in fall, the Sun is exalted. So the Sun is really doing all the work for both of those, for the houses that are ruled by them. And the Sun rules the 4th house. This person may be very, I don't want to say controlled, but very involved with their family and with the structure of authority in their family. That might be something that this part of this contretemps I'm talking about might be involved with that. All right, but basically, so my estimation. So why? Of course, I said negative because I saw the Mars there, I just saw, I mean, I saw the retrograde Mars with K2 in Virgo and saw that and thought, okay, that doesn't look, that looks like it could be negative. Then, of course, Mercury is in the 12th house. I saw it with the sun. I thought it was combusted, but it isn't, thankfully. But then also looked at how close Venus was to the sun and Saturn. Then looking at it now, we see that she's completely besieged by the sun and Saturn. Besiegement, this is besiegement by assembly. So besiegement is when a planet is in between two malefics, and the sun becomes malefic whenever a planet is in conjunction to it, because then the sun, because of its excessive heat, combusts that planet. So that's what combustion is the sun burning and husking out the planet within its proximity because of its excessive heat. So I think so. Okay, so my point about this chart was that not only did I didn't necessarily just think that having kids would be negative. I actually think that there will be problems with fertility. This chart actually has a challenge with fertility, in my opinion. Let's see, where are we going? Oh, I'm looking for the part of children. It's daytime, so Jupiter to Saturn. So Aquarius to Aries is 60 degrees, 14 to 10 is 60 minus 4. So, and that's going forward. So from Gemini to Leo, so you can see another from one sterile sign to the next. From Gemini to Leo, 10 degrees of Gemini to 10 degrees of Leo, back four is 6 degrees of Leo, getting getting a relatively nice opposition from the sun, but getting the trine of all that other stuff, getting the trine from the Saturn, trine from the Venus, so that particular part, and then the ruler of that part is the sun, who's the ruler of the 12th and quite strong, but that's a sterile sign. So I think that, do I think a child is possible? I think I'm going to be straight up. I think that there will be a lot of heartache around having children and possibly also with raising. That's where I stand.